Thanks for agreeing to sit with me for the BCDevExchange first podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Todd is the director of the BC Developers Exchange and part of the team that started the lab and grew it into the place it is today. Todd is passionate about working with leading edge technology and leveraging his skills as a change agent to deliver success through partnership and innovation. His experience with enterprising technology transformation, coupled with a passion for open source collaboration, drives him to seek out opportunities where he can share his knowledge at scale and spread the capability of digital delivery across sectors. I have been fortunate to work with Todd for over a year and have appreciated that from our first connection, he made me feel part of the lab community and the team right away. I noticed that Todd did that for everyone that he connected with. I've been continually impressed with his curious mind, love of learning, that he doesn't go looking for no, and his kindness. So I have some questions for you, Todd. What brought you to the public service?
That's a good question. This isn't my first tour of duty in the public service. When I lived in Nova Scotia, I worked for the Ministry of Health there for 5 years and helped them set up a brand new program for colorectal cancer screening. So that was back in the early 2000s. And that was really my first introduction into public service and also my first introduction into agile app development. We were working under very tight timelines and also with very undefined requirements. And so sort of out of necessity, we kind of tripped our way through an agile mindset. And before we knew it was called agile, we had an agile team.
Nice. Okay, that's quite a great start getting into agile. What was your background before government?
Before government, I worked mostly in consulting. So I had been in various iterations as a consultant, some public service work, but also working with some large financial institutions as well. And I think that was one of the things that brought me back to the public service. I think after the Ministry of Health, I was back in the private sector for a little while. And, it's good to feel connected to the place you live. And it's good to feel like the work that you're doing is making a difference. And I think, working in a provincial government is pretty close to home. Like you do see changes that you can impact and you can see directly with the work that you do showing up in the community that you live. And I found that to be really gratifying and one of the reasons why I've had so much fun working with the Developer Exchange.
Well, how did you get to be working at the BC Dev Exchange?
That was a bit of luck. So when I first was hired into the government in BC, it was part of the OCIO in the architecture and standards branch. So I was brought on to help them with their enterprise architecture efforts. And then that's when I first met Peter Watkins. He was working in a strategic arm of the OCIO at that point. And he had an idea in his head to make app development in government better. And one of the ideas was to create a developer program, sort of a community of government developers working with and for government delivering apps and delivering them in a better, more scalable, more supportable way. One of the things that was pretty obvious was app development was very expensive, very hard, large, long-term projects, and they were very prone to failure. And so Peter recognized that there was a lot of opportunity there to drive change and drive higher value. So my previous job before I joined the BC Gov, I had worked creating a developer program in the private sector to create health information APIs across various health information systems. So Peter had caught wind of that, dropped by my cubicle in 4000 Seymour and said, "Hey, I hear you've created a developer program before." And I'm like, "Uh-huh." It's like, "Do you want to do one again?" And I'm like, "Okay, tell me what you're thinking." So he kind of, sat me down, walked me through the ideas that he had and what he was thinking about. And it wasn't called the BC Developers Exchange at that stage. It was still pretty much an idea bubble above Peter's head. But I was in. I think it was a great idea, and it was something I was really excited to be involved in. So that's how that happened.
So what was it like in the beginning?
It was a discovery process, really. We had an idea that there was a better way to deliver applications in government. How we were going to do that was largely unknown. So, we had a hypothesis that is like, okay, we think we can make this better, and we think we need to involve, the systems integrators around town. We think we need to involve the tech sector. We think it has something to do with, agile and open source, but we needed to figure out sort of what the shape of that was going to look like. So the early days were very much a journey of discovery. We worked really closely with the Government Communications Branch, GCPE, and some folks that were there. They were instrumental in helping us sort of figure out how to do some of the user experience research and talking to different communities and getting engaged with the tech sector. And then there was also some early collaborations with the Data BC folks, because they were already getting started on a bit of an open source journey themselves with the data catalog. And so we sort of latched onto that and said, oh, okay, you guys are already doing an open source effort. You're using an open source tool. You're contributing to a community. How does all that work? And so we did a lot of discovery sessions with those folks and the work that they were doing. And so started pulling that together, and it started to shape up into what we would now recognize as the Dev Exchange.
How would you describe the role you played in that?
Uh, my role, so it's sort of I don't know, that's a good question. My role is to pragmatically and practically execute on things. So I think, Peter Watkins would describe himself as the troublemaker and the idea guy, right? It was my role to come in and see what we could land in those ideas and see what the trouble stirred up. So Peter would sort of swoop through, come up with some big ideas and then stir the pot a lot. I would come in after that and take a look at like, okay, so what did we end up with, and what can we actually, land out of this? What's going to stick?
Nice. Very good. Well described. Um, People are often surprised when they learn the details of what the BCDevExchange is. At the same time, many other governments are underway with digital innovation things. Why is the BCDevExchange unique or different?
I think it is unique and different because for two main reasons. We, at a very early stage, decided to focus on the developer persona as our primary, customer, the beneficiary of the work we do. And that's, again, very different than a lot of other jurisdictions. The idea of customer in government is a very abstract thing. Are we talking about citizens, or if we're a shared service, are we talking about other ministries, or, what is the customer? And it's a little hard to put your finger on it. When we decided to focus on the developer as our customer, things became really clear. It was a very straight line to draw that if we're making things better and easier and more effective for developers, the end product of that will be better apps and will be better services. So, it's kind of, start the intervention at the beginning rather than at the end. The other thing that I think is different about the Dev Exchange than other sort of digital efforts that I have seen around is we were very focused on delivering a working app or a working service. So having developers working on a thing and delivering it to production and being more holistic about that whole journey was a different approach than a lot of jurisdictions took. Some jurisdictions would, heavily engage at the sort of upfront inception and, problem definition stage, and then would be kind of hands off after that. Or they would come in with a lot of standards and a lot of sort of rules on what the output needs to be, but they wouldn't be so engaged in how you did it. And so I think that more holistic approach that we took on the Dev Exchange and being engaged in the entire delivery life cycle, so that we focused from idea to working thing in production, and that we were sort of hands-on and involved the whole way along, was a different approach. And I think part of the success as well.
You have seen a lot of teams and their initiatives. What about a team tells you it is likely to go well versus struggle?
Okay, that's a great question, and yeah, I have strong opinions on that one. Um, I cannot understate the value of an engaged and empowered product owner. We've really had a hard time with that in BC government to figure out the best way to set up a product owner for success and what types of people are well suited to be a product owner. So there is work to do there, and without a good enabled product owner who can make decisions about what is going to get worked on and what is going to get delivered, doesn't have to always abdicate to a full chain of command, and doesn't have to seek multi levels of approval before they do everything. That's a key ingredient. I think another key ingredient that I've seen for success is having a mature enough technical capability on your team. We've seen some teams come in that are a bit too junior and kind of miss a lot of the what do you say um, sort of high quality and value add types of things that most apps would need. Things like solid automated testing or solid automated deployments, things that typically a more junior developer wouldn't be aware of even. And so there is a senior developer role that we have also really identified as a key to success. Another thing too is having a designer on the team that is willing to sort of break out of the box of pure design. So if we've got a pure designer on the team, that's not so helpful because they're kind of in a bit of an echo chamber. We find when there's like a UX designer on the team who also can code a little bit, or who also might help with the scrum master duties, or might also do other things and be engaged in the team in a more cross-functional way, that works really well. Because I think pure design is great as a discipline. Pure design on an app development team starts to kind of form some silos within the team, and we find that those silos are actually quite destructive.
For the teams that have struggled, what have you seen them struggle at the most and why?
The biggest struggle that I've seen is probably demonstrated well by a lot of the natural resource teams that we've had is our organization, sort of as an enterprise, isn't well suited to supporting an agile team. And then an agile team isn't well geared to give the enterprise the information it's asking for. So basic things like, project updates and, funding estimates and budget predictions all of a sudden become much harder than they should be because the organization is asking questions. The team is trying to answer them the best they can, but they're basically speaking a different language. And so I find when teams are working in an agile space, working with the lab, working with the dev exchange, but they're still connected back to a government department who is more traditional, working in a waterfall way, has a traditional project management office, and that PMO is expecting certain reports and artifacts and updates and things like that. It creates a lot of friction for the agile team, and it creates a lot of work either for the scrum master or the product owner to be constantly living in both worlds, trying to translate things back and forth. It almost becomes an extra job on the team, and I have seen teams really struggle with that and fail because of it.
We all know that it can be difficult to introduce change into an organization like the government. How have you been able to attach and hold together the team of people that made the BC Dev Exchange happen? And how did you manage to keep it fun?
I don't know if it was always fun. There were days. I think one of the things that is key to keeping people together and key to keeping some momentum is having a really clear vision. And then I think the Dev Exchange was very good at that because, like I said, we kept focused on that developer persona. And our clear vision was, if we're removing barriers and making it better and easier for teams to deliver value and to deliver, solid applications, we're doing our job properly. So we would always basically gauge our success on the happiness of teams, right? If we've got a lot of happy teams around us, we're being successful. And so that kind of happiness breeds happiness, right? You got happy customers, you've got happy people. It didn't always work, right? There were times when things, weren't going well, or we weren't able to meet some expectations, or maybe there was, some problems that were going on. One of the things that I think helped keep people together that I focused on, especially in the dark times, is that we have a blameless culture and a community that pulls together when things are hard. So whenever we would have technical problems with the platform, or we would have problems about a particular application or how they were doing something, or a team was having some issues, making sure that we pull the community together to help solve that problem. So the chat channels that we maintain and the collaboration that happens in those channels, I think, are key to keeping people on the same page, and also keeping people happy and engaged. It's really important that collaboration and communication channels are there.
What was a particular highlight that you were proud of?
That's a good question. I've been proud of a lot. Particular one I want to talk about, I think there was a moment in time that when we brought our 100th app onto the platform, and so we basically onboarded our 100th team onto our container platform. That was when it got very real. It's like, oh, okay, this is no longer an experiment. This is no longer just sort of, we use the band of pirates analogy, like off doing a thing. Like, no, there's actually 100 applications running on this platform. It's very much a real piece of the government. Like this is now, an undeniable service. And so I was very proud that we hit that milestone. And I was also very proud of the service level that we were able to maintain with such a small team. At that point in time, the team that was managing the platform was 3 people, including myself. And so we had 3 people supporting a platform for 100 applications, which goes to show that, the story of automation and collaboration that we were telling was working. Like, we could do it with a very small crew, because when there was a heavy lift, the community would help. When things went wrong, we had high levels of automation to make things right again, so we could recover quickly. And I think, again, I'm very proud to be able to demonstrate those capabilities with such a small team.
What advice for those now tasked to carry this forward would you offer?
I would offer those folks, nothing's impossible, I think, is pretty much the advice, as long as you start small and keep an open mind. A lot of times it's very tempting, and also almost feels like an obligation to try to analyze every possible angle and understand all of the risks before you take your first step in any direction. The advice I would give to people is know enough just to take one step, take the step, and then figure out what you're going to do for the next step, right? If you're trying to plan 20, 30, 100 steps ahead, you're never even going to take your first step. You'll never actually move anything. And so that's one of the pieces of advice that I got early on in the BCDevExchange journey from Peter was, we'll just start and then we'll see where we get to. And so that was one of the mantras that we had, is take one step, see where you go, and then take another one. So don't be afraid to start small.
It's a nice way to live. So thank you again, Todd, for sitting with me and sharing your knowledge. I want to close this first podcast with a quote from the Michael Lewis book, Moneyball, because I think it fits Todd and the BCDevExchange work. If you challenge conventional wisdom, you will find ways to do things much better than they are currently done.
Thanks, Ari. It's been a pleasure to be here. It's been great to chat, and hopefully we'll get a chance to chat again.
Yeah, I hope so.